What if the voice in your head isn't yours? Not the deep voice, not the quiet one underneath everything, the loud one, the one that narrates your day, catalogs your failures, tells you who you are, reminds you what to fear, the one that fills every silence before you can notice there is silence. What if that voice was installed, not by your parents, not by your culture, not even by your trauma, though all of those contributed? What if underneath all of that conditioning, at the deepest layer of the system, there is something more deliberate, something ancient, something that understood the architecture of human consciousness long before neuroscience had language for it, and built a cage inside the mind itself so precise that most people spend their entire lives walking its perimeter, believing it is the world? The ancient Gnostics had a name for the architects of that cage. They called them the Archons. And what modern cognitive neuroscience is quietly discovering about the default mode network, predictive processing, and the brain's reality filtering systems sounds less and less like coincidence and more like a blueprint. Who were the Archons? The word Archon comes from the Greek. It means ruler, governor, one who administers. In Gnostic cosmology, the system of spiritual understanding that predated Christianity, was absorbed by it, was declared heretical, and was nearly destroyed. The Archons were not demons in the religious sense. They were not evil in the cartoon understanding of the word. They were administrators, managers of a system. The Gnostics taught that the material world was not created by the true infinite source, the pleroma, the fullness of divine being. It was created by a lesser, blind god called the demiurge, a being of enormous technical power, but limited understanding, a craftsman who built a reality that appeared complete but was fundamentally a copy, an imitation of something higher that the demiurge had glimpsed but could not fully comprehend. And the Archons were his lieutenants, each one governing a layer of the constructed reality, each one maintaining the system through a specific mechanism of control, not through force. Force is visible and creates resistance, through something far more efficient, through the structure of perception itself. The Archons didn't need chains. They built the mind that generates the chains, and then convinced it the chains were its own thoughts. Sound familiar? The default mode network. Let's bring this into the 21st century. In 2001, neuroscientist Marcus Raichle at Washington University identified something remarkable in brain imaging data. When subjects were given no specific task, when they were told to simply rest, a particular network of brain regions lit up with intense, coordinated activity. He called it the default mode network. The DMN activates when you are not focused on an external task. It is the system that runs when your mind wanders. It generates self-referential thought, thinking about yourself, your past, your future, your social standing, your fears, your identity narrative. It replays memories. It simulates future scenarios. It compares. It judges. It worries. It is, in short, the voice in your head. Here is the disturbing part. The default mode network never fully turns off. Even during sleep, it maintains baseline activity. It is the brain's most metabolically expensive system, consuming disproportionate energy relative to its size. It is the loudest thing happening inside your skull at almost every moment of your waking life. And here is what the research shows consistently. The higher the default mode network activity, the lower the reported sense of well-being, presence, and connection to something larger than the self. Studies of meditators, psychedelic-assisted therapy patients, and deep flow states all show the same pattern. When the DMN quiets, People report profound clarity, reduced fear, expanded perception, and a sense of contact with a deeper reality. The cage goes quiet, and the prisoner realizes the walls were never solid. Predictive processing and the manufactured world, but the default mode network is only half the architecture. Modern neuroscience has increasingly converged on what is called the predictive processing framework, a model of how the brain constructs perception, and its implications are more radical than most science communicators are willing to say plainly. The brain does not passively receive reality. It predicts it. At every moment, your brain generates a model of what it expects the world to be, based on prior experience, cultural conditioning, emotional history, and survival programming. Sensory data from the outside world does not replace this model. It merely updates it at the margins. Your actual perceptual experience is generated from the inside out. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing your brain's best current guess about the world, lightly corrected by incoming data. Carl Friston, one of the most cited neuroscientists alive, describes the brain as a prediction machine whose primary goal is the minimization of surprise. The brain is not optimizing for truth. It is optimizing for confirmation of its existing model. New information that contradicts the model is suppressed, reinterpreted, or dismissed before it reaches conscious awareness. The Gnostics called this the veil. The Hermetics called it the illusion. The Buddhists called it Maya. Modern neuroscience calls it predictive error minimization. Different languages, same architecture. And here is the question that the framework raises, but mainstream science refuses to follow to its conclusion. Who wrote the original model? Because every predictive system runs on priors, initial assumptions that were installed before conscious experience began. The brain's priors are not neutral. They are heavily weighted toward fear, separation, scarcity, and social hierarchy. They generate a world that is fundamentally threatening, fundamentally competitive, fundamentally divided. That is not a neutral description of reality. That is a specific interpretation of reality. A curated one. The Archons, said the Gnostics, govern through the structure of perception, not through what you see, through the lens that determines what you are capable of seeing. The seven governors the Gnostic texts describe 7 Archons, each one governing a specific domain of human psychological experience, each one maintaining a specific layer of the sleep. The first governs material attachment, the belief that physical survival is the supreme priority, that scarcity is absolute, that the body is all you are. The second governs desire, the perpetual hunger that is never satisfied, the replacement of genuine nourishment with endless consumption. The third governs ignorance, not the absence of information, but the active resistance to transformation, the comfort of not knowing, the relief of certainty. The fourth governs jealousy and comparison, the social hierarchy that keeps humans in perpetual competition, measuring the self against others, never arriving. The fifth governs pride, the ego's investment in its own story, the refusal to be wrong, the cost of identity defense. The sixth governs fear, the system's most efficient governor. Fear of death, of judgment, of inadequacy, of the unknown. Fear that makes every other governor more powerful. The seventh, the outermost layer, governs fate, the belief that nothing can change, that the system is fixed, that awakening is for special people in extraordinary circumstances, not for someone living an ordinary life with ordinary pressures and ordinary pain. Now compare these 7 governors to the cognitive science literature on human psychological dysfunction, attachment theory, addiction and reward circuitry, cognitive dissonance and belief perseverance, social comparison and status anxiety, ego defense mechanisms, the amygdala's threat detection bias, learned helplessness and fixed mindset. The vocabulary is different. The map is identical. The Gnostics were not writing mythology. They were writing a psychology textbook 2,000 years before psychology existed as a discipline. Why sleep is more efficient than force here is the elegance of the system that makes it almost impossible to argue against its design. A sleeping population does not need to be controlled. It controls itself. Fear-driven minds police each other. Comparison-driven minds compete rather than cooperate. Ego-defended minds dismiss challenges to the system as personal attacks. Fatalistic minds don't organize. Desire-driven minds are infinitely distractible. You don't need surveillance when people are too busy watching each other. You don't need censorship when the predictive brain discards threatening information before it reaches awareness. You don't need force when shame, comparison, and the fear of social exclusion do the work automatically. This is what the Gnostics meant when they said the Archons govern through the structure of the world, not through direct intervention. The system is self-maintaining. The prison runs itself. And the most sophisticated feature of its design is this: the system provides just enough stimulation, just enough reward, just enough meaning to prevent the sleeping population from ever becoming desperate enough to look for the exit. Not too much suffering that produces revolution. Not too much comfort that produces boredom and questioning. The precise calibration of just enough distraction, just enough hope, just enough fear. It is, if you step back far enough, breathtaking in its precision. The exit the Archons fear here is what every Gnostic text, every mystery school tradition, every contemplative system that survived the suppressions agrees on. The Archons cannot touch the spark, the divine seed, the fragment of genuine source consciousness embedded in every human being is outside their jurisdiction. Not because it is powerful in the way they understand power, but because it operates on a frequency they cannot access, cannot replicate, cannot counterfeit. Fear cannot touch it. Desire cannot seduce it. Pride cannot inflate it. Comparison cannot diminish it. Even the predictive brain, with all its sophisticated reality filtering machinery, cannot generate a convincing simulation of it, because it is the only thing in the human system that is not a simulation. It is the real thing. In a world of copies, the Gnostics called the path to gnosis direct inner knowing, not belief, not information. The lived, embodied recognition of what you actually are beneath every layer of installed programming. And modern neuroscience has inadvertently mapped the neurological correlates of that recognition. The quieting of the default mode network. The dissolution of predictive priors during high-entropy brain states. The gamma synchrony observed in advanced meditators. The ego dissolution documented in psychedelic research that consistently produces, across subjects, across cultures, across decades of suppressed study, the same report. I realized I was not my thoughts. I was the awareness in which thoughts appeared, and that awareness was not afraid. The Archons built a brain that keeps you asleep, but they could not build the part of you that wakes up. That part was always there. It was never installed. It cannot be removed. And the moment you stop mistaking the voice in your head for the truth of what you are, the moment you catch the system running and recognize it as a system rather than reality, the architecture of the cage becomes visible. And visible cages, no matter how precisely engineered, no matter how long they have held, can be walked out of. See you in the next one.